In a historic comeback, 78-year-old Donald Trump has returned to the White House as the President of the United States. Well, this victory, announced today, comes just 4 years after he lost the presidency. Well, Trump clinched the office by winning over 270 electoral college votes, a decisive win confirmed by Edison Research. Well, joining us at this moment to give us updates on this very interesting win, we have VOA's correspondent from Washington, D.C., Auriane Itangishaka. Hello, thank you for joining us today.
Alma, thanks for having me.
Okay, so let's talk about this election win for Donald Trump. So, what's the atmosphere in Washington now as the election results are coming in?
Right, Alma, and thank you. Here in Washington, it is indeed, even in the nation, official that former President Donald Trump has made this historic comeback to the White House after 4 years. And yes, the atmosphere in Washington, obviously, for those who know, this area is very much Democratic area. It's a bit sad. It's a bit slow, just like an everyday day at work in the city. Obviously, because the city of Washington, D.C. is a small city within Maryland and Virginia. And Virginia and Maryland are states that are mostly Democrat states, and states that Vice President Kamala Harris won. And so it's a bit of a sad atmosphere right now as we speak. Everyone just, seem to be going about their business, it's very calm in Washington.
Okay, so just to recap for our viewers, what are the major policies that were put forward by these two leading candidates in these 2024 elections?
Right. Americans, for the most part, were very concerned in this election and spoke a lot about three main issues, being the economy, being the reproductive rights for women, and also illegal immigrants. We've seen a surge of illegal immigrants coming into the United States in the last 3 to 4 years. And so those were the three main issues that Americans wanted to hear their candidates speak about and tell them what they were going to do about. Now, women are historically a large voting bloc in the United States. And so they were very interested in hearing what Kamala Harris was telling them about how she was going to protect their rights as women. And so they came out in large numbers in support of her. We saw that also in polls throughout this campaign, her campaign. For Donald Trump, former President Donald Trump had a lead with men, specifically with men, Latino men and African-American men who were very concerned and who expressed grievances in the high prices of things, how prices have been surging in the past several years. And these are working class men. And we also saw the youth coming out and voicing concerns over the economy, something we saw a lot on social media. So those were the three main things that voters came out to vote so that they can see change.
Yeah, so you've spoken about the men and you've spoken about the women. So how did the different demographics vote in the presidential elections?
Right. So Vice President Kamala Harris did do very well with educated white female voters, while, as I said, Donald Trump was mainly with men. So we saw a very big divide. We saw a big gender gap in this election. We also saw a significant gap in a race gap in the demographic in terms of the age groups. Young people did definitely come out as well, more than we've seen in the past. And again, it was because of the economy, but mostly women supporting Kamala Harris because of reproductive rights, and mostly men for Donald Trump because of the economy.
So let's look at the swing states now. We understand that they played a very instrumental role in these elections. So what role did they play determining the outcome of these elections?
Correct. The swing states are very crucial in the United States electoral system. And I will remind that President Donald Trump won the electoral vote by 277 votes, while Vice President Kamala Harris won 222 electoral votes. And I will remind, and perhaps for viewers who don't understand this system, is that swing states are states that are, I should say, somewhat equally divided between the two candidates, the two parties, the Democrats and the Republicans have equal influence in these states, which means that there are battlegrounds. We call them battleground states, where if you win that state, you get a specific amount of points in the electoral votes. For instance, I'll give an example. If you were to win the election with two different states, for instance, Virginia would have about 11 electoral votes, while Pennsylvania would have 19 electoral votes. So the more states that have more electoral votes that you get, the more you're likely to win the White House.
So for those of us in Africa, what can we expect when it comes to the U.S. Africa policy under, well, now Trump's second presidency?
A very good question. While in the Democratic as well as in the Republican presidency, we have seen an urgency, a sense of urgency to have to hold on to Africa because of the influence of China and Russia, obviously. And under President Biden, we saw that in the past several years, he has tried to push the Libido Corridor project, which was to strengthen trade between Angola, Zambia, and Congo. And this was going to strengthen the relationship between that region of Africa and the United States. And under Biden, we also saw, however, a sort of anti-sentiment, anti-West sentiment towards, his presidency. We saw Niger ask the United States to close and to shut down its drone base in that country. And that was a big loss for the United States. We saw also other countries hostility towards the West, so Burkina Faso, as well as Mali, and a lot of the Francophone countries in the Sahel. And so that pushed the United States to have to do a lot of convincing Africa that they were going to do more to keep that relationships. Now, under the Trump's administration 4 years ago, we saw Trump's administration challenging Africa to basically choose the United States over Russia and China for their commercial trade, security, and political partnership with the continent. However, we know that the AGOA initiative, which is the African Growth Opportunity Act, is up for renewal in 2025. And this specific initiative between Africa and the United States is a long-term commitment and a bipartisan support that the United States has with Africa. We're yet to see what's going to happen in 2025, whether the United States will keep that initiative going forward with a new administration under Donald Trump.
Okay, so we understand that there are differences between the electoral system here in Africa and the one in the United States. So we understand there is no nationwide government agency that is in charge of calling the winner for elections, as it is in many parts of Africa. In Nigeria, we have INEC, and of course we have those for the states as well. But why is that?
Right, that's a good question as well. Well, this is an example of how very transparent and very straightforward the system is here in the United States in terms of announcing who the winner is. The states have the rights and they have the mandate to announce who has won in their particular state in terms of how many votes a particular candidate had. And so each state must announce the number of votes, both electoral as well as popular votes that they have received from the counts, and then announce it to everyone, not just to the government. But so that system seems to have been working very well, where the states are the ones counting the votes and announcing to everyone at the same time. So it's a bit different from Africa, where a commission or a government entity counts the votes and then announce it to everyone. But I think it's a sign of transparency, and then it's a sign of giving the states the responsibility to count the votes from their constituency.
Okay, so let's look at campaign financing. What role did this play in the U.S. elections? We understand there was some conversation regarding that when it came from the Trump's camp. So how did that affect the outcome, of course, of the elections?
Right. I wouldn't say that it influenced because money was not really something that we saw that works to the benefit of the candidates. Because if you look at former Vice President Kamala Harris, her fundraising campaign was very strong, very, very strong, that she received over $1 billion in campaign funding, versus former President Donald Trump, who received about 400 million in his campaign fundraising efforts. So money was not really the deciding factor on who was going to win in this race. So it's a very interesting thing. I mean, Vice President Kamala Harris had a lot of money to work with, but yet it seemed to not be working on her benefits for some odd reason. We're yet to understand why that is, but it was very interesting to see that people were more interested in what their candidates were going to do for them. They already knew what they wanted to vote for, and they already knew what they wanted from their candidates. So I guess advertisement, social media hits, and all of that didn't really play a lot because money sometimes do work, but not this time.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned social media because I want to know, how did social media and digital campaigns, work out on voter engagement, and how did it reflect or, engage on election results?
I would say social media was a part of it. Young people are on social media. Everyone is on social media nowadays. However, I would like to point out that mainstream media has been really battling conservative independent outlets online. And so we've seen the Joe Rogan podcast, we've seen the Tucker Carlson podcast, we've seen the Candace Owen podcast that have really a very strong base, and they were very instrumental in supporting former President Donald Trump on the conservative side. And so social media really took away what we're used to seeing on the mainstream media, the big major network that people really used to tune in to get all of their news. Now in the United States, young people, older people, everyone is really tuned into independent media, which, we've seen former President Donald Trump, make appearances to. Kamala Harris also appearing to The Breakfast Club, former President Donald Trump appearing on Joe Rogan's podcast. So these independent media have been very influential in these elections we see.
Well, just before we let you go, what lessons have been learned from these elections, and how is that influencing its outcome?
Right. As we look back and how we were covering this election and the different voices we were getting, I think people really wanted to be heard. They wanted the issues of everyday Americans to be solved, both on the Democrat side and the Republican side. We've seen people really sort of tune out the noise, because there was a lot of noise from both sides, but people genuinely wanted to see solutions, and particularly on the economy. Americans on both sides have been sort of struggling in the past few years, and obviously they believe that former President Donald Trump will be able to solve that issue. And I think moving forward, both campaigns will focus on listening to the everyday issues of the American people, the middle class American people.
Okay. Auriane, thank you for joining the show today and giving us those updates. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Amma. Okay. My pleasure.
So we've been speaking with Auriane Itangishaka from VOA. Well, she is in Washington, D.C., and she gave us those updates regarding the recent U.S. election. Well, the program continues. To stay with us.